Good afternoon, sports fans from all around the globe. I am your host, Jeff Dawson, East Coast Sports Investors. And it's time. It's Friday, February 4th, 2022. The weekend is here. It is a off week for the NFL as we get closer to the Super Bowl. The Rams currently minus 4.5 against your beloved Cincinnati Bengals and Smoking Joe Jamar Chase and company. The under over currently at 48.5. It's Friday. It's our trip to the Windy City. Part two. Yesterday we had Colton. Today we have his co-host Riley, and in our segment that I like to call "From Mags to Riches," where we go from NBA to college to Big Ten. I will not bring up the Packers and the Cheeseheads. That season's over, but I can't wait throughout the off season having Riley on Fridays talking, what's going on in Cheesehead country as we get closer to OTAs. Actually, we're going to have to pick his brain on the draft. I think that will be his homework assignment, where he gets us ready for the draft and maybe where the Packers might be going or where he wants them to go. But without further ado, my man, my Friday man from the Windy City himself, the one, the only, Mr. Riley Magnuson. Good afternoon, Riley. How art thou?
I am doing absolutely fantastic, Jeff. As always, thanks for having me on. And yes, you're right. The Packer season is over, so we don't need to talk about too much of that. Colton already gave me some jabs as far as these rumors that he's going to Tennessee because now he's rumored to have bought a big old slab of land in somewhere around Nashville. So you be the judge of what you think of that. But I'm calling fishy on the old Tennessee Titans. But nonetheless, I'm doing fantastic, my friend. How about you over there?
We talked behind the scenes. This college basketball is. I thought I cracked the Da Vinci Code the other day, and it cracked back again. We finally cracked NC Wilmington last night, which was our only plus. Got to push on another game, but as we talked about, it's been a tough nut to crack. The eyes aren't deceiving me. It's just the results that are deceiving
Right.
me. How about yourself?
We were talking earlier. My co-host yesterday, he came out and told you about it. He's been our guy college basketball wise, and I told you it's him having success certainly isn't frustrating to me. It's me have so much love for college basketball and staunch opinions, and I just this week I've kind of taken a back seat and have not really hammered too many plays in. I told you I took Duke early in the week against a Notre Dame team that I thought was just a bad matchup for Notre Dame. And aside from that, I've kind of just sat back and played a lot of the NBA here as I've kind of found my stride the last month or so, January into this month in the NBA. And until further notice, I'm going to be real tentative in college basketball, like you and I were kind of just talking. And, if I keep finding this value in the NBA, one or two plays a day, I'm going to keep rolling with that so far right now. But, like I said, it's driving me nuts because I watch more college basketball than I do NBA. And so, it would be nice to have some action that I feel confident in on a daily basis.
How about the weekend review since we talked last in the Big Ten? Any surprises? I know Illinois kind of flexed their muscles against Whiskey the other day. Just when you think maybe Michigan might start to catch their stride, they just come back down to reality. Purdue, I mean, listen, they just look like the team, that's probably going to end up being, that 1/2 seed come bracket time. The weekend review, what transpired, your thoughts, pluses, minus, and moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it. Going back to, I guess, last Saturday or this past Saturday, the matchup against going into Michigan State with a short line looked like Michigan might be able to hang with them, and that just wasn't the case. It seems like they've kind of leveled out and are starting to beat the teams that they're supposed to. I think they bounced back and took care of Nebraska. I don't know if they covered in that one. But yeah, I wouldn't be too. It's almost a little too late at this point. Too little, too late. I'm trying to say at this point for them to build that type of resume to get them into March. I think they might be toast. The other team, double overtime loss on Monday, Iowa, a team that in a lot of spots, I'm a big fan of as far as their value, but on a given day, it's tough to judge what they're going to do because their offense, when it's firing, is fantastic, but that defense is just it leaves something to be desired. Double overtime loss at Penn State. Penn State's not terrible by any means. I think Nebraska and I'm blanking on who else would be lower than them. I don't think they're the worst team in the Big Ten. I think they would probably be pretty competitive in a lot of other conferences. But when you're trying to build a resume to leave no doubt to get yourself into March, that was a rough one in my opinion. And the Illinois win, I mean, I've talked about it. I'm not a diehard Illinois fan, but I am an Illinois fan. So that was obviously impressive. Taking care of the -7 at home, I think it ended up climbing a little bit. I think that was Wednesday night. So that was pretty damn impressive to me. I don't know if that's a combo of buying into Illinois going forward and maybe Wisconsin's going to come back down to earth a little bit, or if that was just a tough matchup for Wisconsin. I think they're probably going to kind of remove themselves out of that top 2 conversation as far as contending for the Big Ten title in the regular season. I don't know what your thoughts are there, because they're still a really good team, right? But they just, I don't know, they're starting to find out that they don't have that extra edge to get them over the top on a consistent basis. Is kind of where I see the Badgers these days.
So if I was to ask you right now, Purdue, Illinois, Michigan State, and then a drop down to Whiskey, Iowa, or is it just can you separate that at any point, or is it just each day is a different day?
I think for the most part, I think each day is a different day. I would separate Illinois and Purdue, though, especially Illinois beating Michigan State without Kofi Cockburn. I mean, we've talked about them before without Kofi Cockburn. They've had problems when they haven't had him, and their defense really stepped up in that one. And now, we saw them dominate that game against Wisconsin the other night. So I really think, and the game that Illinois played Purdue, he was in some serious foul trouble. So if that changes around, if they see them again, I'm honestly not sure if we see that matchup again in the regular season or not. But I have to imagine there's a good chance we could see that in the old conference tournament. I think it's those two, and then there's a little bit of a gap. I mean, Michigan State is really good, and I'm sure, I have to believe we'll probably be putting our foot in our mouth because the January, February, April. I mean, you almost have to expect them to put up a fight in the conference tournament at the very least. I just don't think they're on the same wavelength as the two that we're talking about, Illinois and Purdue, just on paper at least, and from an eye test, in my opinion.
It's going to be crazy. Always is. I mean, especially in that conference. I mean, most of the conferences, I will say that, there's always a Cinderella or come tourney time. I mean, look last year at the Big East, here comes Georgetown out of nowhere, just rumbling and tumbling. If I was to say blindly, if there was one team in the Big Ten that would shock us, that made a run in the tournament, who would you pick?
I guess I don't know if it wouldn't shock me. I don't know if it would shock anyone else because they're currently an unranked team. But I actually really like Indiana. I mean, Iowa is that other team. If they get hot, then whether it's surprising to people or not, if their offense is scorching hot at the right time, then they're going to put up 70, 80 points per game. I don't know if it's shocking to a lot of people around the country or not, but I still really think Indiana's a really good team. Obviously, from a gambling perspective, we don't always look at the AP rankings. I think they should be a top 25 team. I believe they're hosting Illinois tomorrow morning, and that I'm interested to see what the line is there. It wouldn't surprise me because they've got some size that they can hang with Kofi Cockburn and the rest of the Illinois squad. So it wouldn't surprise me if Indiana puts up a good fight against Illinois tomorrow in Bloomington, but like I said, I don't know if that's surprising to a lot of people, but aside from that, the rest of the pack, the Rutgers, Penn State, I just mentioned Penn State. I don't see them going on a run and beating, more than one really. Maybe they'll put up a surprise, knock off one really good team and then kind of struggle after that. They wouldn't be, yeah. So that would be the other team where I just can't really see them winning 2-3 games against some of these, top 5 teams in the conference. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if they knock off somebody, one of these big boys in the first couple of rounds, though.
All right. You talked earlier here about the NBA. We're going to pull up today's schedule for you. I just want to say, as we were speaking, Harden is out today for Brooklyn. That just came across from Don Best. So give you a little insight there.
Yeah.
Let's pull up the screen for you.
And that one, I certainly, at this point, I'm not taking any action on that game specifically, just sticking there for a second. But Harden himself has been part of, obviously they have no Kevin Durant. That's been a part of their issue the last week or so. James Harden himself, without Kevin Durant, has been pretty damn brutal. So I'm actually interested to see, like I said, for that reason, I might stay away from that altogether. It might not surprise me if they had a different recipe tonight that worked out, because Utah still no Rudy Gobert. Their defense has been rough, Jeff. I've found certain spots to fade them over the last week and a half or so without Rudy Gobert. On a 6-game losing streak now, I don't know what we're going to get from Brooklyn without James Harden. I have no interest in backing the Brooklyn Nets, even getting any of these points. I don't know what your thoughts on that one are.
Yeah, the NBA I have kind of faded for a while now. I'll pick my spots where I think there's an opportunity. I'm still that firm believer in the halftime call and the end of the third period call. Came in a perfect spot. I think it was last Friday. And this team did this to me before on a Friday about 3 years ago, where Washington was up 31 and a half and ended up losing the game outright. And at home, that's the thing. They did it to me. I think it was about 3 years ago on a Friday. They were playing your Bulls. And they were up 30 and a half. They were favored by 3.5. And of course, at halftime, you got your chest out and you're feeling good. Yeah. And then you start to see the comeback. And then at the end of 3, I think they cut it to like 13 or 14. You're like, no way, this isn't happening.
Right.
And sure enough. So it's kind of crazy how some of these NBA games turn up, where a team that's averaging 30 points a quarter for the first 2 or 3 quarters, throw up 11 in the fourth quarter. It's head scratching.
Oh, I told we recapped our picks from yesterday this morning. I had the Clippers last night -3, and then I moved up to 3.5, I think, against the Lakers last night. The Lakers went on a 28-17 fourth quarter run. Clippers won by 1, busted my bet, and but yeah, they were coasting through that fourth quarter, as opposed to the first 3 quarters they dominated almost the entire game, and then they take their foot off the gas and blow the cover. Still managed to get the win, but blow the cover. That was a rough one. But as far as today, Jeff, speaking of my Bulls, I do believe that this against the Indiana Pacers at Indiana, I actually am. I don't enjoy doing this, but once again, I am actually fading the Bulls in this spot tonight. It pains me to say, because I am a diehard Bulls fan, but I do not enjoy betting against them. But I believe I've told you about their defensive efficiency and what they have not been able to do over the last few weeks without Caruso, Lonzo Ball, Derek Jones Jr. Their defense is falling through the floor. I quote tweeted, if you go follow me, and I've talked about it on your show, I believe Kirk Goldsberry releases like a defensive and offensive efficiency map. And the Bulls, time and time again, week after week, are just falling lower and lower. They're getting near the bottom of defensive efficiency, and it's been brutal lately. I think people need to stop looking. They're still, managing to tread water at the top, tied with the Heat, I think, for the number 1 seed. But when you're looking at the Bulls, you can't look at them as that number 1 seed. They're just without. I love them, and their offense can still score, but without their defensive guys, they just aren't that. They're not above the pack of what we're seeing in the East right now. So I'm taking the Pacers plus 2.5, and I did a little bit on their team total over 115.5. Their offense efficiency at home, the Pacers, is top 10 in the league, and so I think it's going to be a rough defensive outing for the Bulls. I'm not sure if you got it in front of you right now. I'm honestly just blind, Jeff. I can never read this board that we've got in front of us today, so I'm not sure. I see a lot of money coming in on the Bulls, and I can't remember if it was last week or the week before, because I know I've bet against the Bulls, I think 3 out of the last 4 Fridays, and they're 0-3 straight up the last 3 Fridays. And you've talked about on Friday, I think the NBA especially has been a big old trap spot for certain games, and I think the Bulls have been that clear trap spot over the last few weeks. I'm seeing a lot of money coming in on the Bulls, and I told Colton and I were talking about 4, 5, 6 o'clock. 90% of the people that we know and love, we're going to start seeing them on Twitter talking about whether this flips or not. They're going to be pouring even more money in on the Bulls. So I think this is a tough spot for them. 5-12 last 17 against the number in Indy. So aside from all the things that I'm talking about, they could be in trouble there. And Zach LaVine is questionable. Had some back spasms in last night's game. They are on a second night of a back-to-back as well. He's questionable again. Ended up playing, but was complaining all game long about these back spasms. So I'd be surprised if he goes tonight again. But even if he does play, I think it's going to be tough sledding for him.
Yeah, it's a game where rotation number 515, 516. It's a 7 p.m., 7:10 tip-off. And you brought up something, again, Friday, fade the public. It's payday. and they love their favorites, they love their overs, and they don't do the work all week. They get their paycheck in hand, and as you said, they jump on the gambling Twitter and they just run to the window. A game where the Bulls are receiving 64% of the tickets, 83% of the money. They opened at 1.5. They are 2 across the Vegas Strip. An under over that opened at 231.5, where you talked about your Pacers team total at 115.5. So it makes sense. So Vegas initially had this at around, a 116, 115 final. So you're hitting all the chords that I like to hear.
Well, in addition to that, and I've gotten like kind of giggled at, but it's been working out for me. I've been picking off a lot of these rest against the spread, or teams that are just coming off, whether it's back-to-backs or even teams on 2 days rest, whether they're good or bad, and coming off 2 days rest. That's been a nice spot for me. I will say, if you're someone who is interested in props, I kind of talked about it a little bit yesterday. One of the two worked out. The other one actually cooled off for the Raptors last night. If you're a player props person, take a look at whoever the starting couple of guards are, or even some of the bench guards for the opposing team against these Bulls, because I mentioned no Caruso, no Lonzo Ball. Kobe White's been really good offensively, but he's a defensive liability. So if you get a guard, or especially a point guard, but even some of these guards that are averaging 15 plus points per game, and their odds aren't too crazy to score at right around where their averages are, take a look at these opposing guards against these Bulls. And in addition, before we move on, I talked about it yesterday. Obviously, Zach LaVine ended up playing. If Zach LaVine doesn't go, now and ever, honestly, take a look at Ayo Dosunmu's props. Whenever Zach LaVine is out, his average kicks up. I think he's averaging about 13.5 points per game whenever LaVine is out, and his point total is typically right around 10. I took it yesterday, assuming LaVine was going to be out, and he still ended up going over it, but obviously LaVine was playing. So again, keep an eye out for that. If LaVine is out, maybe take a look at Dosunmu props for tonight.
I'm looking at the board now. Atlanta at Toronto opened at 1.5, jumped to 3. Houston at San Antonio opened at 3.5, now 6.5. So there's a big move on the Spurs there. Very intriguing matchup. Philly at Dallas. Dallas opened at 1.5, staying at 1.5. There is a 2 at DraftKings. We talked about Brooklyn and Utah. That's up to 5.5 now. Again, no James Harden there.
Right.
New Orleans, Denver, OKC, Portland. Anything else jump out at you tonight?
Yeah, so before I guess there's a couple that Colton and I had some action on the show today. I mean, as he's told you, and as I've told you before, I failed to mention what we had last week, and he tweeted at us. Our Friday 4-pack special play, we've got 2 NBA legs and 2 college basketball legs. We took, so to share what his 2 college basketball legs, Manhattan and Niagara over 132, Fairfield plus 6.5. But sticking here with the NBA, we jumped on that Raptors money line when it was right around -2, I do believe, and then also Pelicans plus 6.5. Atlanta and Toronto, both those teams played last night. Toronto actually beat my Bulls in overtime. So a back-to-back in overtime, that is a little concerning. They're actually the number 1 team in the league against the number off of back-to-back, Jeff. I think it's 7-2 against the number with 0 days rest, whereas Atlanta is, I think, 3-6 against the number on 0 days rest. But Atlanta burned me, so I like the money line for the Raptors. I think that game is going to be really, really, really good. It's a really important game as far as the Eastern Conference standings go, as far as jockeying for that 7 through 10 playoff seeding, or trying to get higher than that, obviously. And I honestly thought Trae Young was going to come into yesterday's game. He had been complaining about his shoulder, can't even get practice shots up, and then he drops 43. So I don't know what we're going to see from him tonight, if we're going to see the same Trae Young. I have to imagine, speaking of Friday public, after seeing him do that the night before, and then now we see him in a fairly big game against the Raptors, I have to imagine the public's going to be rushing to the Hawks as we get on through the day, but I'm happy to stick with the money line there and kind of stay away from this line movement there. I don't know what your thoughts are there.
I agree. I again, Friday public favorites and marquee names. We've talked about it at length here. ourselves at ECSI, we haven't really taken the full dive into the prop market. I always talk about it, and especially you got the Super Bowl coming up,
Yeah.
and Westgate just released like 450 props there. But when you talk about NBA and props, and you talk about gambling Twitter, there's not an over that they don't love, and they just
Right.
go to the big names, whether it's Giannis, whether it's LeBron, whether it's Trey Young, Embiid. I mean, Embiid had that amazing 10-game stretch where,
Right.
his under over just for points was like 31 and a half. Then it goes to 32, 32 and a half.
Yeah.
It's sick. The prop market. Let me ask you an honest question.
Uh-huh.
I know you understand that these numbers are actually inflated because no one plays the unders in the prop market.
Right.
So do you find it hard to look at some of these numbers? I mean, because people want to sit down and they want to root for points, and more points. Knowing that the numbers are inflated, how does that affect you when you're actually dissecting the prop market?
Yeah, so I typically go with the guys that are not those marquee names. I honestly, every once in a while, I'll fade those guys. I never enjoy, unless I have something or a piece of information that I think is really glaring, to go against these guys like Steph Curry or KD taking the under, and then he drops 40, 50. You feel like you got egg on your face. So I honestly, as far as the big names go, I typically stay away because they are, as you said, they are inflated for sure. The guys that I like to take, and I mentioned Io DeSunma earlier. I like guys that they set the number right around where their averages are. His is a little different because he's obviously a rookie and wasn't playing as much in the early season. But guys, I like these guys as if we're talking point totals. I like guys that are like 15 to 22 point per game scorers, and the books often set those guys right at what their averages are. And I'm talking Brandon Ingram, Fred VanVleet, unless these guys are scorching hot and the world knows they're scorching hot. Those are the ones that I like to target against these very matchup based, kind of how I was talking with the Bulls in their opposing team guards, to where Gary Trent Jr. was one I talked about. I had two yesterday that I took, Fred VanVleet and Gary Trent Jr. And Fleet took care of it. Gary Trent Jr., who had been absolutely possessed, I took him, and I finally had a cold night. But aside from that, yeah, you're right. I almost have no interest, unless it's a very, very glaring, obvious, like fantastic matchup for one of these guys. I don't touch these big name guys with a 10-foot pole most of the time. On my side of things.
All right, so we have the NBA covered. Tomorrow there is like 158 college basketball games, something so crazy that it's just pure insanity. I talk about numbers like that. When you talk about first halves, you talk about second halves, you talk about team totals, you talk about unders and overs. I mean, there'll be thousands of ways to bet these games, and I didn't even talk about in-game.
Right.
We know your heart, Big Ten guy. What's the weekend look for the Big Ten on Saturday and Sunday? I know a lot of these games you don't have the initial spreads, but just give us a preview so we know what's coming for the Big Ten this weekend.
Sure. I mean, as far as tomorrow, I mean, the marquee game that I would say that we're seeing right now is that one that I already mentioned a little bit, Illinois at Indiana at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. So kicking off the slate. And without seeing a spread, if this is another one where if it's 4 or less in Illinois' favor, I might be interested in Indiana. If it's because, I mean, you saw the other day they were a 7-point favorite against Wisconsin, and I think I've mentioned we can't bet on Illinois teams legally, so sometimes we aren't stalking these numbers quite as much as we would the rest of the board. I believe the public was all over Wisconsin catching that many points. If we see 7 or higher again, I have to imagine that's an Illinois line, but I actually wouldn't be surprised if we see something under 4, and maybe this is a tight game. Maybe Illinois wins but doesn't cover or something along those lines, because they've got some size, as I mentioned. The way they played against Purdue obviously has a higher volume of guys that have size, and Indiana matched up well with them. So Kofi and some of their bench guys that Illinois has, I think Indiana can match up with them. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if they took care of business in that one.
I'm always cringe. I talk about Friday nights, rough Friday nights. people hung over. Their payday is now they're scrambling. They didn't pay the light bill and the cable bill, and now they're scrambling. And you wake up all fogged, and you got 6 or 7 games at noon. And I always say, guys, these are kids. Okay, we don't know what they did the night before. Were they at the frat party? Were they hosting 300 kids? Or were they trying to travel to get to these cities for the game? I know back east last week, we got 2 feet of snow on Saturday. Today, now there is going to be 2 feet to the west of us, but sleet, rain changing to ice, severe ice storm coming our way. Yesterday, up in the Ohio area and Texas area, there was almost a dozen games canceled due to the weather. So, as you get that early start. How do you take a look at the early start games? Does it affect you at all, or is it just business as usual?
Everyone I would say is a little different. I mean, Holden and I kind of joke sometimes, and sometimes we're really serious. Sometimes, I mean, I would say day of the week trends, sometimes it's very coincidental. And honestly, sometimes with college basketball Saturday, it's kind of how you mentioned, sometimes you don't know what these kids did last night. If you got a team that's, 1-9 against the number of the last 10 Saturday games, that might be something you should take a look at. And of course, that shouldn't be the only piece of information you use by any means, but it should at least be like, oh, they just don't show up on Saturdays. Honestly, those early starting games are the ones that, when I'm looking at them early in the morning, are the ones that I feel more comfortable are those kind of trap spots. Like, honestly, with this in Illinois, Indiana, like I was saying, if it's 3.5 or less, I think, because there's less time for, the market to recorrect itself, for people to kind of realize that it might be a trap and hammer all of their money on Indiana. That's kind of how you're saying, a lot of the general public is going to be waking up and trying to rush to get some bets in. They're probably going to be hammering in Illinois in a short favorite line. So as far as those early games, I've kind of found some success there. And then as the later days go, or the later games go on, I guess we're talking about early scheduled games, so it's not really the same story. But the like later, kind of what I'm saying this for is these. I see better I can see traps clearer when they're early on in the day on Saturday as opposed to later in the day. Is kind of what I'm trying to say here.
Later Saturday, even Sunday, any marquee games in the Big Ten catch your eye?
Well, the two teams that we were kind of just talking about, we'll see what the spread is, and we'll see how things shake out. But it wouldn't surprise me. I don't like fading Wisconsin at home because that home environment is one of my favorites in the country, and toughest to play in and toughest to go into and win. But it wouldn't surprise me if Penn State put up a fight there. We'll obviously see what that spread is, but that's one that I'm interested in. The other three kind of in the middle of the two that we're talking about, Northwestern Nebraska, I've got no interest in taking any action either way on Nebraska. Michigan, Purdue, again, kind of just after what we saw last week from Saturday, I do not really feel comfortable at all taking a side either way in that one. Again, we'll see what the spread is, but in my head, I kind of feel like Purdue's going to destroy them in that game, but at the same time, you never know when they're going to, every once in a while, they wake up and play a fantastic offensive game. So I'm just going to stay away from it. And then Michigan State, Rutgers as well. I have been staying far away from Rutgers as well. They are at home, though, so they could put up a fight there as well. Maryland and Ohio State. At Ohio State, I don't know about you, but we've talked about Maryland pretty often. They're another team that it's tough to judge. And Ohio State's been really I would say the biggest under the radar team while still being ranked somehow. People aren't talking about Ohio State at all. People, they kind of get these 5 to 9 point spreads and haven't faced the toughest schedule in the world as far as the Big Ten goes. So I think they probably should roll Maryland there at home. Interested to see if it's 4 or higher. I think they probably roll that one. But again, we talked about it as far as what they did on Tuesday at hosting Michigan State. It's still just so tough to trust them after what they've done all season long. I know you kind of agree on that one. And then it looks like Minnesota at Iowa, another team, Minnesota, we've talked about as far as being a lot of smoke and mirrors, if you will. And I feel pretty comfortable that Iowa should have a ton of success at home, shooting the lights out against them. But as soon as they say that, then they put up a 4 for 25 performance from behind the arc. But I think Iowa could be a good spot depending on what we see in the number there to back the Hawkeye Sunday afternoon.
I can't say enough about the information that we get from you on Fridays about the Big Ten. I love that conference. I do. Unfortunately, I don't have as much insight and feel like if someone wanted to talk to me for an hour about the Big East, I could go up and down through.
Right.
Obviously, season ticket holder to UConn there. And speaking of UConn, an absolutely dreadful loss to Creighton earlier this week. And now they got to travel to Villanova, who also is coming off a loss to Marquette. So Jay Wright and company will not be happy, and they'll be actually smiling ear to ear to see these Huskies, who then on Tuesday got to turn around and host Marquette. So there could be I hate to say this, but there potentially could be a 2 or 3 game losing streak here for my Huskies.
And then you said that one is at Villanova, right, tomorrow?
Yeah, and Ken Palm has 67-60 Villanova, so it'll be interesting to see what that opening number is. My initial guess was 5.5, 6. I probably will see about 6.5, probably the start. Kind of one of those. UConn's been a real slow starter, and if they get out to a slow start against Villanova, it could be lights out early.
Yeah, because when Villanova's on, I mean, you've seen them obviously. When Villanova's been on, especially at home, they're almost a runaway train, as kind of how you're saying. So maybe Villanova first half, I don't know. The Big 12 has been the other conference this year that, and always as far as being able to talk about it. But Big 12 has been a conference. The last week or so, I've been staying away a little bit more. But the Big 12 has been a spot, kind of a sweet spot for me in college basketball this year. I almost probably about as profitable as anything. Iowa State, Texas is on Saturday. I think Texas is going to get a big bounce back there at home. We'll see I wouldn't be surprised if that's a 5.5, 6.5 spread, and people are looking at Iowa State as kind of that, maybe ends up being a public dog, because their offense is pretty rough at times, especially on the road. You get their defense at home and they can take care of business. But I think they're going to start fading in the Big 12 in Texas after, going into that environment that they did in Lubbock at Texas Tech. I think they're going to be licking their chops for this one. And then Baylor, Kansas is the other one on Saturday afternoon. I don't know. I haven't checked the news. Abaji was out against Iowa State, and they obviously still took care of business. I honestly think for this one, apples to oranges, Baylor and Iowa State, and obviously being at home in Kansas, I think that could be a situation where if he's in, and like I said, I honestly don't know. I think it was a COVID-related outage, which I'm not sure if he's back or not. If he's back, I think they could put up a good fight and even win that game. If he's out, I don't think they have enough firepower, and I think Baylor rolls him in that one.
Yeah, I just off the top of my head, if he is playing, I could see again, like a Kansas minus 3.5 or something on that spot. Yeah. And people will be looking at that and say, you mean I can get Baylor plus 3.5 at Kansas? Right. And then I'll just transition quickly to the SEC, where Auburn still number one. Their only one loss this year, by the way, was to UConn, kind of comically. So hats off to my Huskies there.
Of course.
Let me ask you this. We're going to close with this because we have now seen this a couple of years. I am not discrediting Gonzaga because I think they're a team. I don't think they're as good as they have been in the last couple of years. Yet again, listen, it does not do you well long-term come tourney time to be 25, 30-point favorites against these teams because this team is not put into these situations pressured down 2, down 3 with the ball late. And I do know that they do play a good non-conference schedule to start the year. They did play some iron, but coming into the season, rounding into the conference tournament, and then obviously March Madness, where, hey, listen, if they're gifted the 1 seed and they're playing out west, well, God, good luck. But what's your thoughts of the Zags?
I'm 100% with you, Jeff. I mean, I'm looking at it right now. They're plus 600 to win the entire thing. That seems asinine to me. And Auburn's now finally starting to get that respect as the number 2 spot that I'm seeing plus 800. I think they're very good. Don't get me wrong, and they often are really, very, very good. Obviously, I think they were a little more scarier last season. Had last season's team, obviously this is a weird, connection, but if last season team had been this season's team, I think they would roll through this entire tournament. But they just don't have that same edge. And it's almost like every single year, kind of as you mentioned, they get to the spot where now they're only playing these conference teams, 20, 30, 35-point favorites, and they roll them by 40, 50 points. And then we start to talk ourselves into them just being a juggernaut when they're playing. They've got a couple teams that are respectable in that conference this year, obviously, but I mean, they still take care of business, no problem. So I personally believe, I don't think they're going to win. And especially if we're talking as far as where the value is, if we're trying to pick out an outright winner, I don't think you should be looking at them at all at plus 600. I think you can look down further in the pack outside of even the top 5 or 10 teams. And because I just think 1 through 40 is closer than it ever has been. I feel like maybe 3 through 40 last year was kind of the similar way, and Gonzaga and Baylor were a little bit of a step ahead of everybody. I don't feel that way at all this year. I don't think it's a bad idea to take a swing at any of these, plus 3,000 or plus 4,000 outright winners. We were talking Texas Tech, or even if Texas gets their defense right, I really like Texas Tech plus 3,000. You have Houston at plus 3,900. I mean, they're kind of quietly rolling along through their season. I guess a little bit of a similar situation, right? Not quite the same as Gonzaga, but their strength of schedule obviously falls off come conference time. But I think if you're trying to play a big or an outright winner at this point, I think you look outside of the top 10, honestly.
Yeah, we grabbed before Auburn became number one. We got them at 18-1. We have some Arizona at 17, 18-1.
Yeah.
I get the preseason flop of UConn at 100-1. I like your Texas Tech thought process there. And the key for us is, listen, I'm not telling people to go dive in and put, one full unit on all these things. What you want to be able to do is to set yourself up. So come, Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final 4, where you might have a couple tickets still standing, and they make great hedge possibilities.
Right, 100%. And with all the value that's out there, and how I said, if I truly believe 1 through 40 isn't that far apart. I wish we would get some more at this point odds to make like Sweet 16 and Elite 8 runs, because I would probably get a little carried away as far as that is concerned. Honestly, trying to talk myself, and then I'll be handcuffed by bracket making time. But I think there's some teams that's got some good Final Four value as well. I mean, Colton and I just talked about it. I can't remember if it was yesterday or the day before. You're not going to see Gonzaga, Duke, Kentucky, and Kansas making the Final Four. There's going to be at least 1 or 2 type of, whether it's huge surprises or minor surprises. I think you can find some value in that market as well.
Yeah, speaking of futures, ECSI, we had pre-flop August, September, 49ers NFC champs, NFC Super Bowls. Some people jumped in November, got higher prices there. We had the Chiefs plus 400, and we ended up last man standing. Now we got the Rams plus 215. So again, we have some opportunities if we want to on next Sunday, to goof around with Joe, the money line, the plus 4.5. Maybe it gets to 5. Or some people just can sit and let it ride. Say, hey, I think it's the Rams year, and we'll sit and stay.
Yeah, we haven't dove in too deep into the prop markets in that one. And Colton brought it to my eyes, and I actually just saw it on Twitter again. I for whatever reason, I had in my head had it cooked up differently. As far as just a real quick specific Super Bowl prop, the opening kickoff to be returned, and if Colton's going to be mad that he didn't get to say it, but the opening kickoff to be returned, yes, is I want to say last year it was like plus 230. I think they'll probably suck the odds out of it this time. But because the ball is it's a different ball, and it doesn't travel as far, right? So oftentimes the guy catches it either the 1 yard line or right on the edge, and so you can call me crazy all you want. And again, I know this one's Colton's favorite, but I saw it was like minus 110, minus 110 somewhere else. I don't know if that's what we'll get again here or not. But that one, the opening kickoff guy, don't you steal my pick. Opening pick, hey, I think people are going to be talking about it, and the value is going to leave it. So I think we got to drop it down real quick. But yeah, and then the kick returner in the Super Bowls, looking to make a big play right at the jump. You know what I mean? So as far as a real specific prop, that one actually has some solid value typically.
Hats off to Colton. Colton, you should have revealed it on yesterday. Listen, you got the leg up on Riley. You come in on Thursday, he comes in on Friday. So you got to be ready, my brother.
Hey, I'm sure he'll be coming to you next Thursday and beating me to the punch actually this time and the next time around. But yeah, we're going to be ready for it. We had actually last Super Bowl was a big day for us last year as far as getting Talking the Line off the ground. It was essentially our first, and we didn't do an actual podcast, but it was essentially our first like video content. So that'll be a nice almost 1 year mark as far as getting our faces out there specifically. So I'm excited for Super Bowl, my man.
Speaking of that, I've left the crawler going throughout the show. For anyone watching and listening, first of all, big thanks. Love all the support. Love everything that you guys are doing for us on social media. You can follow Riley at Mags TTL Sports and obviously Talking the Line. But Riley, it's that time. The stage is yours. Tell everyone where to find you, your podcasts, where they can go to jump on board and follow you and our buddy Colton.
Alrighty, so you see crawling around down there. RMAGS TTL Sports is my Twitter handle, as well as Talking the Line. That is our combined Twitter handle for everything that you see there. You go there, you probably get a good chance of getting just about everything you need. TalkingTheLine.com is the other spot. Instagram talking__ the line. And check out our YouTube, Talking the Line Sports Media. And we're all over the place. I'm sure I'm forgetting something, but we've got Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. Central Standard Time is our daily show, Talking the Line podcast. Wednesdays, they release at noon, but you can check them out. We've got them standing. Just about any of them have, no time constraints as far as the time relevancy of them. So you can go back and listen to the show that we had Jeff Dawson on as far as Wise Words podcast is what I'm talking about here. Those are Wednesdays. We had Jeff on that earlier on in this season, and getting close to the end of season 2. We'll have season 3 coming around in a few months. And then Saturday mornings, 8:30 a.m. Central Standard Time, Cup of Joe on campus, breaking down college basketball slates for that Saturday. Usually, when they combine, it's college football, college basketball, or one or the other. But obviously now we're into college basketball season. And that's about it. That's where you can check us out at. TalkingTheLine.com is the one-stop shop. Check out our plays today on Action app, Chalkboard app. I already mentioned my 2 today. Pacers plus 2.5 in the team total. Colton, I'll drop his down. He's got that's our parlay. He's got Dartmouth and Yale over. He's got Northern Kentucky plus 3.5, Creighton plus 6, and San Diego State plus 3.5. And then the old Friday 4-pack, as I already mentioned, Manhattan Niagara over 132. Fairfield plus 6.5, Raptors money line, and the Pelicans plus 6.5 is the 4 that we've got on that bad boy. Gave that one out today. We've got all of our stuff from today on today's show as well on our YouTube, so you can go check it out there. But if you need anything, go to talkingtheline.com or right there, Talking the Line on Twitter.
Much thanks. And again, anyone watching the show that need any advice, any questions, reach out to them. And the comical thing is they reply back, not like most of these guys on big stages, big platforms that only click and talk with the blue check mark or the blue hairs, as I like to call them now.
Right.
These 2 guys hit the floor running, full year in their second year now, and they're just a blast to talk to educate. We're blessed and honored to have them both here on Thursday and Friday. And you guys go follow them, catch some high octane, high energy education from the Windy City. And again, thank you so much for coming on as usual. So,
of course, thanks for having me. You got me anytime you need me.
From Jeff Dawson at EC Sports Invest, from Riley Magnuson at RMAGS TTL Sports and Talking the Line, we thank you all for blessing us and listening and supporting us as we are getting closer to the Super Bowl. The weekend's here. We want everyone to enjoy themselves. Have some fun with these games. And always remember this, if you are wagering today, tonight, tomorrow, this weekend. Always wager responsibly. If you have a problem, pick up the phone. There's an 800 number available. Ask for help. Why? Because we care. We want you here today, tomorrow, next week, next month, through 2022 and beyond. So again, from myself, Jeff Dawson, and Riley Magnuson, we wish you all a great day, a better weekend. Cash some tickets, and we will catch you tomorrow.